For most of his career, Jeff Gordon said all the right things about Dale Earnhardt. He called him a legend, the greatest to ever strap into a stock car, a man he admired, respected, looked up to. He said it in press conferences, in interviews, in tributes after Earnhardt died. But in January 2019, in a sit-down interview promoting the Fox Sports documentary Unrivaled, Earnhardt vs. Gordon, Jeff Gordon finally said something different. He said plainly and without hesitation that racing wheel-to-wheel with Dale Earnhardt was something he could not stand, because no matter what Gordon did right, Earnhardt would still, in his own words, just shove him out of the way. And then he said the thing that nobody in NASCAR had heard him say out loud before, that Earnhardt's death left him with questions he would never get answered, that he wished more than anything he could pick his brain, because some of what Earnhardt did on the track, Gordon still couldn't explain or fully forgive. Today, we're going to build the complete story. The championship battles, the mind games, the specific documented incidents on the track that Gordon finally stopped pretending were just racing, and the cruel, permanent reason he never got the conversation that might have closed the wound. Stay with me, because this is the rivalry NASCAR sold you, and then the truth underneath it. To understand what Gordon admitted, you first have to understand what he walked into when he showed up in NASCAR. The sport in the early 1990s had an identity. It was Southern, working class, built on grit and family names and tracks that smelled like rubber and gasoline and tradition. And Dale Earnhardt was that identity made flesh. He was from Kannapolis, North Carolina, son of a racer, 6 championships by the time Gordon arrived. He wore black. He drove like the track owed him something. His nickname wasn't a marketing invention, it was a description. The Intimidator wasn't just fast. He made other drivers afraid, and he did it on purpose, and NASCAR loved him for it. Then came Jeff Gordon, 21 years old, from Vallejo, California. Babyface, rainbow-colored fire suit backed by Rick Hendrick's money and Ray Evernham's genius on the pit box. He'd come up through open-wheel sprint cars, not the Southern late-model circuit that NASCAR considered the proper credential. The fans spotted the difference immediately and hated him for it. But Gordon could drive. He finished second to Earnhardt at Charlotte in 1993, his rookie year. Then, in 1994, he won his first Cup race at that same track. Earnhardt won his 7th championship that same year, cementing his legend. Gordon was still the new kid, still the guest. That was about to change. Because in 1995, for the first time, these two men weren't just sharing a track. They were hunting the same trophy. The 1995 season is where this story really starts. Gordon won the season's 2nd race at Rockingham, then Atlanta 2 weeks later, then Bristol after that. 7 wins total across the year, and a championship points battle with Earnhardt that ran wire to wire all the way to the final race at Atlanta. And throughout that entire season, Earnhardt was running a parallel campaign that had nothing to do with lap times. It was psychological, deliberate, and it had a name even inside Gordon's own garage. Ray Evernham, Gordon's crew chief, the man who built the Rainbow Warriors into the most dominant team in NASCAR, later described what Earnhardt did to Gordon in practice sessions with a single, precise image. He said that Jeff would get out there and mix it up with Earnhardt in practice, and he used to tell him not to mess with him, that it was like poking a stick at a rattlesnake. "You're going to get bit," read that carefully. Evernham wasn't describing Earnhardt as a fierce competitor. He was warning his own driver to stay away from him. On the track, Earnhardt's method was to operate in a zone that existed just past the line of what could be penalized. He pushed bumpers, He closed lanes that were open. He gave contact that sat in the gray area between aggressive racing and deliberate interference. The zone that's impossible to call because you can always label it a racing incident. Off the track, he called Gordon Wonder Boy in the press, when someone asked if Gordon would have to toast the crowd with milk if he won the title. Because Gordon didn't drink. Earnhardt didn't correct the joke. He let it sit. Gordon didn't like any nicknames and was just trying to be Jeff Gordon. But Earnhardt understood something Gordon didn't yet. That the psychological game started before the green flag dropped and never really stopped. Gordon admitted years later, in a 2023 interview at Hendrick Motorsports, that early in his career he wasn't mature enough to fully read what was happening. That Earnhardt was not only trying to get under his skin a little bit to get a competitive advantage, but was also playing a longer game, manufacturing the kind of rivalry that put people in seats and kept NASCAR on television on Sunday afternoons. Earnhardt was running 3 races simultaneously, the championship, the media, and Gordon's head, and winning all 3. Gordon won the championship anyway. At 24 years old, he beat the greatest driver in the sport's history to the title. And at the championship celebration, he toasted Earnhardt with a glass of milk. It was the sharpest thing he ever did publicly to that man. A clean, undeniable needle. And Earnhardt, who had called him Wonder Boy, who had spent a full season trying to shrink him, had to smile and take it. The rivalry was officially on. Now we get specific, because this is the section that has to be anchored in what actually happened. Not what it felt like, not what people suspected. What is on record? Michigan International Speedway, a mid-1990s practice session. Gordon had a fast car and was closing on Earnhardt quickly. He saw a gap. He went for it, underneath Earnhardt going down the back straight. And Earnhardt immediately drag raced him, refusing to yield, forcing Gordon to either back down or make contact. Gordon's own words on this years later. He said he was catching Earnhardt so fast that he thought he wasn't going to have any problem passing him. So he got underneath him going down the back straight away, and Earnhardt was drag racing him. This was practice, no points. No championship implications. The race hadn't even started. Earnhardt did it anyway. Because the message wasn't about that session. The message was about every session after it. You don't pass me unless I let you. The 1997 Daytona 500. This is the one that lives on film, and it tells you everything about how the dynamic between these 2 men worked. Earnhardt, in his number 3 Chevrolet, made contact with the outside wall. The chain reaction collected multiple cars. Dale Jarrett, Ernie Irvan, others taken out of contention. Gordon, in the chaos, found himself in position late in the race and took the win, his first Daytona 500. The moment that should have been pure triumph was also the moment that crystallized, on camera and in front of millions, exactly what racing Earnhardt meant. That Earnhardt's driving style could reshape an entire race in an instant. That contact was always part of his vocabulary, and that Gordon's success was always built on navigating around a man who saw every lap as a negotiation conducted at 180 miles per hour. Gordon blocked Earnhardt again on the final lap in 1999. Calmly, cleanly, methodically shutting the door on the man who had spent years teaching him that doors could be closed on you at any moment. It was Gordon answering in the only language Earnhardt ever really spoke. But here's the quote that unlocks all of it. In January 2019, Gordon said this, that on the track, he could not stand racing wheel to wheel with Dale Earnhardt, because he knew that he might not do anything wrong, and Earnhardt might still just shove him out of the way. Read it one more time. I might not do anything wrong, and he might still just shove me out of the way. That is not how you describe competitive intensity. That is not how you describe two racers battling hard but fair. That is how you describe a man who broke the unwritten contract. The one that says the result should be decided by who's faster, not by who's more willing to cross lines the other driver won't. And then, in the same interview, Gordon said he wished more than anything that he could pick Earnhardt's brain today to ask him why he did some of the things that he did, the things on track, or the things in the media. That he would love to know some of those answers. But we'll never know. That sentence carries weight for a reason, and the reason is what comes next. On February 18, 2001, the final lap of the Daytona 500, Dale Earnhardt hit the wall in Turn 4. He died from his injuries that afternoon, and with him died the one thing Jeff Gordon had never gotten. Not an apology, not an explanation, just an honest conversation. The kind that could only happen between two adults, away from the cameras after the trophies were already counted. The kind where Gordon could finally ask, why? Why the contact that wasn't accidental? Why the mind games that went past competitive banter? Why the rattlesnake kept striking even after Gordon had already proven he belonged? That conversation was never going to happen during their careers. Gordon knew the rules. You don't publicly accuse Dale Earnhardt, not in NASCAR, not in the South, not when Earnhardt is the reason half the people in the grandstands showed up. You'd be dismissed as a sore loser before your next pit stop. So Gordon kept the professional mask in place. He performed diplomacy perfectly. He said all the right things in all the right rooms, and Earnhardt kept pushing, and Gordon kept winning. And the wound stayed open because neither man ever addressed it directly. And then the door closed forever. What followed was something Gordon couldn't have fully prepared for. NASCAR began canonizing Earnhardt in real time. The number retired, the murals, the merchandise, the mythology growing larger every year. Earnhardt wasn't just a former rival now. He was a saint. You cannot be publicly angry at a saint. So Gordon waited and carried it, and kept giving the diplomatic answers, the gracious tributes, the careful praise, for nearly 2 decades. Until 2019, when the unrivaled documentary Fox Sports, co-produced by Dale Earnhardt Jr. himself, official and sanctioned, gave Gordon a format where he could finally speak with something closer to honesty. Not the full truth. Gordon is too controlled for that. But close enough. He said he couldn't stand racing Earnhardt wheel to wheel. He said Earnhardt would shove him out of the way even when Gordon did nothing wrong. He said he wished he could ask Earnhardt why, but we'll never know. He didn't call him a villain. He said something more devastating, that the questions would never be answered, that the closure would never come, that some chapter of his career would remain permanently, irreversibly open. Jeff Gordon won 4 championships. Earnhardt won 7. Together, they are the 2 greatest drivers of the modern era and the central figures of NASCAR's most commercially significant decade. For most of that time, we were sold a clean story. 2 competitors, mutual respect, opposites who pushed each other to greatness. That story isn't false, but it isn't complete. What Gordon admitted across multiple interviews in carefully chosen language culminating in the Unrivaled documentary is that Earnhardt operated by a code Gordon found genuinely difficult to accept, that the contact wasn't always racing, that the mind games went past competitive spirit, that some of it crossed a line he was never able to fully move past. And then the man who crossed that line died before Gordon could look him in the eye and say so. Gordon's most revealing line isn't the one about being shoved out of the way. though that one is extraordinary. It's the one about wanting to ask why, because that's not what you say about someone you've made peace with. That's what you say about someone who still owes you something they can never pay.